So now let's transition into talking about in-text citations. So when you're citing an article within a paper, you need to include an in-text citation. So you report the full reference in the reference section, but in the actual paper itself, you want to include an in-text citation. And you need to give an in-text citation when you're describing a paper, making a claim or statement of fact that is not yours, or explaining an idea that did not come from you. So anytime you're using another source to come up with your ideas, that's when you're going to need to include an in-text citation. So a very important thing to remember is when you're writing your introduction, the majority of the information that you're going to be writing about is going to come from other sources. So you need to include a lot of in-text citations in the introduction section. What tends to happen is that students will have one or two citations in the introduction and conclude that they've done enough. But in reality, most of the claims that you're making in the intro do not come from you. Especially when we get to the lit review, you're citing other people's work pretty much throughout that lit review. So there should be a number of in-text citations in your intro. So you definitely will get penalized if you aren't adequately citing your sources. Now, in-text citations for articles should only include two things: the author's last names and the year of publication. Oftentimes, students will include a bunch of other information in there, the author's initials or their full first name. Um, all you need to include are the author's last names and the year of publication. So let's look at some examples, and I'll kind of go through two different types of in-text citations. So the first type is called a narrative citation. This is when you're incorporating the author's name in the text of the sentence itself. So you're describing a particular researcher in the sentence, and therefore you're citing them within that sentence. So example here is Casson and Fong, 1999, demonstrated that training does not improve lie detection accuracy. So we're talking about Casson and Fong in the sentence itself, so we're going to cite Casson and Fong. When you are using a narrative citation, the author's last names are in the sentence itself. You put the year in parentheses. Now, in parenthetical citations, this is when you're citing the authors at the end of the sentence. And you are going to, again, report the author's last name. And between the author's last name, you're going to write ampersand, the ampersand symbol, instead of the word and. So in the narrative version, we had Casson and Fong. But in the parenthetical now, at the end of the sentence, in parentheses, we have Casson ampersand Fong, and then comma and the year. Okay? So that's the big difference, is that when you're writing it in the sentence, so a narrative citation, you report the author's last names with and between them. And the and always comes before the last author. Then the year in parentheses. For parenthetical, you're going to, in parentheses, report the author's last names. And before the last name, you're going to use the ampersand, comma, and then the year. Now I'm going to say it again because people always forget. When you're doing in-text citation, it's just the author's last names and the year. That's it. So when you're citing articles with just one author, all you have to do is write the author's last name followed by the year of publication. So in a narrative citation, you would give the author and then the year in parentheses, and then you would complete the rest of the sentence. In a parenthetical citation, you would write your sentence, and at the end, in parentheses, you would include the author's last name, comma, and then the year of publication. Now, when you have an article with two authors, you write the last names of both authors followed by the year of publication. So in a narrative citation, you would include the author's last name, and before the last author, you have the word and in parentheses, you'd have the year of publication, and then the rest of the sentence. In a parenthetical citation, you would have your sentence, and then in parentheses, you would have the author's last names. And before the last author, you would have the ampersand. So Steele, ampersand, Aronson, and then the year of publication. Now, there's a unique situation when you have three or more authors. You can write the words or the letters ET space AL at all after the first author's last name, followed by the year of publication. So this saves you from having to write every author's last name. You just write the first author's last name at all, followed by a period, and then the year of publication. So in a narrative citation, it would look like this: Casson et al., then the year in parentheses, and then you would complete the sentence. In the parenthetical citation, you would have your sentence, and then in parentheses, you would have Casson et al., and then the year of publication. So the key is to know when to include et al. And remember, it's only when there's three or more authors you would write et al. Um, so this is a unique situation when you have three or more authors. So here's some additional APA issues that I want you to be aware of. First, when it comes to the font for the actual text, just stick with New Times Roman. Don't change much for that. 12-inch font for your tables and figures, which I don't require you to do, but if you were to do tables and figures, those typically are an Arial. Your spacing should be double spaced throughout. Don't add extra spaces. So double space for the entire paper. Even when you're changing sections, just keep it double spaced. Don't add an additional space. Even your reference section should be double spaced. Everything's double spaced. For the paragraphs, indent the first line of every paragraph by 1/2 inch. So just push tab and then you're good to go. For the text, you want to have left justified, which will leave the left side smooth going down, but the right side will be kind of jagged. It won't be smooth. So you don't want to have full justified where both the left and the right margins are smooth. That's not correct APA formatting. Just stick with left justified, which again is the default. So for most of these things, if you stick with the default, you're going to be fine. For spacing, you're going to have to change it to double space. But for the paragraphs, for the text, for the margins, which are 1 inch all the way around, those are all just the defaults. Just don't mess with that. And again, Times New Roman is also the default. So as long as you stick primarily with the defaults, except for your spacing, you should be fine. Acronyms, you are going to want to write out the acronym the very first time that you use it, and then the actual word itself, and then provide the acronym so people can link the actual words with the acronym. So at the bottom here, we have the State Trait Anxiety Inventory, and then we give the acronym STAI. Now you can just use STAI going forward, and the reader will know that the STAI stands for State Trait Anxiety Inventory. But you can't just write STAI and not link it to the actual words, because then the reader won't know oftentimes what that particular acronym stands for. And then just some basic writing issues. Try to use academic language to keep it very formal. Avoid slang. Don't use any kind of contradictions. Don't use abbreviations. Definitely pay attention to your tone and your tense. So don't change tone or tenses within a sentence. That's always a little bit problematic. Make sure that you stick with the parallelism. So if you're saying he or she, then you want to use his or her to kind of link that together. If you're talking about multiple people, you use them or their. Just make sure that your numbering is consistent. So if it's a singular, you want to use he, she, his, her. If it's plural, you want to use them, their. And don't